Derbyshire, October 1848. The road disappeared before Louisa Staveley's eyes, though she had walked it only 3 weeks earlier. She stood at the far end of the map room at Stonebarrow Park, one gloved hand resting against her reticule, while 5 people studied the enormous estate map stretched across a walnut table beneath the cold morning light. No one had asked Louisa to come closer. No one had offered her a chair. She had been admitted because the rector had written ahead on her behalf, explaining that Miss Staveley carried a petition from families whose only usable road had been closed. That modest introduction had earned her 15 minutes of a duke's attention. It had not earned her belief. Dominic Quenby, 8th Duke of Ormsleigh, stood with both hands braced upon the table. At 38, he possessed the stillness of a man accustomed to being obeyed before he raised his voice. His dark coat was severe, his posture exact, his expression unreadable. He had returned to Stonebarrow Park after months in London to review the estate before the Michaelmas tenant gathering, and the newly revised map before him was supposed to represent order. Every pasture had a boundary, every wood bore a name, every cottage cluster was marked in precise black ink. Louisa searched once, then again. Her heartbeat changed. Hollin End was not there. More troubling still, Old Hollin Road had vanished as completely as though no cartwheel had ever pressed into its earth, no child had ever walked beside its hedges, and no coffin had ever travelled toward the parish church along its rutted length. Quentin Arkwright, the Duke's chief land agent, tapped one finger against the western section of the map. He was a handsome, careful man in his middle 40s, with silver beginning at his temples and the polished courtesy of someone who knew exactly how respectable he appeared. The western ground is underused, Your Grace. The proposed quarry lease would provide dependable income without displacing any recognized tenants. Louisa looked at him. That isn't true. Silence entered the room so quickly that even the scratching of the clerk's pen stopped. Quentin turned his head. Lady Sabina Dunstan, Dominic's widowed maternal aunt, raised her brows with mild surprise. Dominic did not move. Miss, Quentin said, in the indulgent tone one might use toward a confused child, I was not aware that you had been invited to advise His Grace on estate management. Heat rose beneath Louisa's collar, but she had endured more dangerous things than a gentleman's condescension. She stepped forward. I wasn't. I came because 17 households at Hollin End have been trying to reach this house for months. Quentin's smile thinned. There are no 17 recognized households at Hollin End. There are 17 cottages, a few abandoned structures perhaps, with smoke rising from their chimneys. The clerk lowered his eyes. Lady Sabina gave a soft breath that might have been amusement. Memory is often kinder than geography, Miss Staveley. Louisa turned toward the map. Geography. The word was meant to end the matter. Geography was respectable. Geography had measurements, ink, and a ducal seal. Louisa had only memory, muddy boots, unanswered letters, and the faces of people who had asked her to speak, because no one with greater rank had listened. She had learned not to confuse silence with surrender. Where is Hollin End? Dominic asked. Quentin pointed vaguely toward the western ground. Beyond the old grazing fields, Your Grace. It ceased to function as a proper settlement years ago. Louisa stared at the parchment. No, Quentin's jaw tightened. Miss Staveley. The road should begin here. She moved nearer, but did not touch the map. It passes the lower ash copse, bends north of the stone wall, and continues for nearly 2 miles before reaching the first cottages. Dominic looked from her hand to the map. There is no road marked there. I can see that, Your Grace. Lady Sabina's mouth curved. Then perhaps this discussion has found its natural conclusion. Louisa heard the dismissal before anyone spoke it plainly. She had heard that sound all her life. It was the quiet certainty that a woman without wealth, husband, title, or official position had reached the limit of what others were willing to hear. Her fingers closed around the object inside her reticule. The old iron key was heavier than it looked. Its bow had been worn smooth by decades of use, and faint rust darkened its teeth. Mrs. Mercer of Hollin End had placed it in Louisa's hand 3 weeks earlier and explained that it once opened the road gate before someone changed the lock. Louisa drew it out now. Quentin's eyes moved to it, only for a moment. But Dominic noticed. She saw his attention sharpen. Louisa crossed to the table and placed the iron key directly upon the blank stretch of parchment where Old Hollin Road should have been. It landed with a small, hard sound. There was a road here. No one laughed. That almost made it worse. Quentin sighed. An old key doesn't establish a road. No. Louisa kept her hand beside it. The road establishes the road. And yet His Grace's estate map shows nothing of the sort. Then the map is wrong. The clerk looked up. Lady Sabina went completely still. Quentin's expression hardened beneath its politeness. Dominic lowered his gaze to the parchment. Louisa could not tell whether she had angered him. She knew only that she would not apologize for the sentence. "You are suggesting," he said at last, "that my estate records omit an inhabited settlement and the road serving it." "Yes, Your Grace, and that no one responsible for those records noticed." Louisa looked at Quentin. "I'm saying someone noticed." His smile disappeared. "That's a serious accusation. Then it deserves a serious answer. You should be cautious about mistaking persistence for proof. And you should be cautious about mistaking a clean map for an honest one." The words left her before fear could stop them. Lady Sabina inhaled sharply. The clerk froze. Louisa felt the consequences gather around her. She had challenged the Duke's chief agent before witnesses and questioned the reliability of a ducal estate map inside the Duke's own house. She had no powerful father to shield her, no wealthy husband to explain away her boldness, and no rank from which scandal might comfortably slide. Dominic straightened. For one terrible second, Louisa expected him to order her out. Instead, he looked at Quentin. "How old is this map?" "Completed last spring, Your Grace." "From what sources?" "Estate surveys, tenancy books, boundary records, previous maps." "Who approved the final alterations?" Quentin paused. "Routine corrections were made under my supervision." Dominic's gaze returned to the blank space beneath the key. He leaned closer. His face changed so little that another person might have missed it. Louisa did not. He had seen something. He moved the lamp nearer, though morning light already filled the room, then examined the parchment from an angle. "Mr. Arkwright." Quentin stepped forward. "Your Grace?" Dominic touched one finger beside the old key. "Why is the parchment rough here?" Quentin looked down. "Age, perhaps. The rest of the map is the same age." The room grew quieter. Dominic shifted the lamp again. Under the stronger light, faint parallel scratches appeared across the parchment. Scraping marks. Louisa's breath caught, but she said nothing. Quentin answered too quickly. "A cartographer's correction, I would imagine." Dominic turned his head. "You imagine?" "I would need to consult the drafts." Lady Sabina moved toward the table. "Dominic, surely this can wait. You have the quarry proposal, tenant accounts, correspondence from London, and 100 other demands. We needn't transform one country lady's concern into an inquiry. Louisa felt the old humiliation return, colder this time. A country lady's concern. That was how truth disappeared. First inconvenient, then sentimental, then female. Then nothing. She reached for the key. Dominic placed 2 fingers on the map beside it, not touching her hand, but stopping her all the same. Leave it. Louisa looked at him. Your Grace? His grey eyes lifted to hers. There was no warmth in them yet, no trust, but there was a tension, and for the first time that morning, Louisa understood why powerful men sometimes frightened people more by becoming quiet than by raising their voices. You said 17 households are there now. Yes, and you walked the road yourself. Yes, when? Quentin watched her. Sabina watched Dominic. The clerk waited with his pen suspended. Louisa stood alone at the edge of the great table, with the old iron key between herself and the most powerful man in the county. She did not lower her eyes. 3 weeks ago. Dominic's gaze sharpened. How can you be certain you walked the road shown nowhere on my map? Louisa looked at the scraped parchment, then back at him. Because I walked it 3 weeks ago. For one long second, no one in the map room moved. Louisa could hear the faint ticking of the mantel clock and the soft hiss of coal settling in the grate. Dominic Quenby kept his eyes on her, as though her answer had altered the shape of the room. 3 weeks ago? He asked. Yes, Your Grace. Alone? Lady Sabina's brows rose again, but Louisa understood that Dominic was not asking about propriety. He wanted facts. I walked part of it with Mrs. Mercer, who has lived at Hollin End for 32 years. Her grandson met us near the lower ash copse. We continued to the gate together. Quentin Arkwright shifted beside the table. That does not make it a recognized estate road. Louisa turned toward him. It makes it a road people still use. A worn track can appear anywhere livestock pass. Livestock do not leave wagon ruts. Dominic lowered his gaze to the blank map again. His fingertips rested a few inches from the old iron key. And the gate, locked with a newer lock. The key no longer fit. Quentin exhaled with measured patience. Your Grace, I believe I can clarify this before Miss Staveley turns a minor boundary matter into something more dramatic. The track, she describes, was discontinued years ago. A few people may still cross the land from habit. But Hollin End has not been treated as a proper settlement for some time. Louisa felt anger rise, but she kept her voice steady. There are 17 occupied cottages. Quentin's expression did not change. There are several derelict buildings. 17 occupied cottages, she repeated. A smithy, a room used for Sunday prayer when weather prevents older residents from reaching the parish church. Families who still pay money they understand to be rent. Dominic's eyes sharpened. To whom? That is one of the questions they have been trying to ask. Quentin looked at the Duke. I must object to the implication. Then answer it, Dominic said. The land agent paused. It was brief, but Louisa saw it. So did Dominic. Any money collected from informal occupants would be recorded through the estate office, Quentin replied. Would be? Dominic asked. Is it recorded or not? I would need to consult the ledgers. You oversee the ledgers. I oversee a large estate, Your Grace. So do I. The words were quiet. They ended the exchange. Lady Sabina stepped forward with an expression of affectionate restraint. Dominic, this is plainly a matter for your agent and solicitor. There is no reason to delay the quarry negotiations over the memories of a few occupants, whose legal status may not even be established. Louisa felt the insult because it was delivered so gently. Dominic looked at his aunt. There is a reason if the proposed ground is occupied. Quentin has already said it is not. Miss Staveley has said it is. Sabina gave Louisa a glance that held no visible cruelty, only disbelief that her words could possibly weigh the same as Quentin's. Surely you are not placing equal value on a lady's recollection and formal estate records. Dominic turned back to the map. No. Louisa's stomach tightened. Then he added, I am placing enough value on the discrepancy to examine it. Quentin's face went still. Dominic lifted the old key from the parchment and held it in his palm. He did not pocket it. After a moment, he set it down again. Mr. Arkwright, bring me every ledger entry connected to the western ground for the past 6 years. Include rents, maintenance expenses, boundary alterations, correspondence, survey drafts, and any instructions sent to the cartographer who prepared this map. Of course, Your Grace. Today, Quentin inclined his head. Today, Dominic turned to the clerk. You will make a written record of the current condition of this map, including the scraping visible beneath the lamp. No one is to remove it from this room. The clerk stood at once. Yes, Your Grace. Sabina's expression cooled. You are making a spectacle of caution. I am preventing carelessness from becoming policy. Then Dominic looked at Louisa. You said families have tried to reach this house for months. How? Letters, 2 petitions, 1 message sent through a carrier who makes deliveries near Ashbourne. Addressed to whom? The estate office? Quentin folded his hands behind his back. I have seen no such petitions. Louisa met his gaze. That is precisely the problem. The silence that followed carried more danger than the first. Dominic broke it. Miss Staveley, come with me. Lady Sabina spoke immediately. Dominic. The morning room door will remain open. His tone made clear that he had already considered propriety and would not discuss it further. Louisa took the old key from the map and followed him from the room. She was aware of Quentin watching her until the door closed behind them. The morning room was smaller, brighter, and less severe. A footman stood within easy call in the corridor, beyond the open door. Dominic did not sit, neither did Louisa. He went to the window, then turned back. I do not know whether you are right. The honesty startled her more than reassurance would have. I did not expect you to pretend otherwise. Good. His gaze dropped briefly to the reticule at her wrist. I also do not know whether Mr. Arkwright has acted improperly. I understand. Do you? Yes. He has served your estate for years. I arrived this morning with a petition and an old key. And a serious accusation. I arrived with people who are being ignored. Something moved in his expression. Not anger, recognition, perhaps. Those are not always the same thing. No, but sometimes they are. He studied her for several seconds. Louisa had the strange impression that he was accustomed to people filling silence for him. She refused to do it. At last he said, Tell me exactly where the road begins. She described the lower ash copse, the stone wall, the bend near the pasture, the old gate, and the ground where wagon ruts remained deepest after rain. She spoke without embellishment. Dominic listened without interruption. When she finished, he asked, Why did no one come directly to Stonebarrow Park? Mrs. Mercer did. 3 years ago, she was turned away at the estate office and told the matter had already been settled. By whom? She cannot remember the clerk's name. Convenient. Louisa stiffened. Dominic noticed immediately. I meant convenient for whoever turned her away. I see. Did you think I meant Mrs. Mercer? For a moment. You expect disbelief. It was not a question. Louisa looked toward the window. Women without rank learn to prepare for it. His expression tightened slightly. You are the daughter of the late Reverend Staveley. Yes. A gentleman's daughter. That protects me from certain forms of contempt. It does not protect me from all of them. The answer hung between them. Dominic looked away first. He moved to a writing desk and touched one of the unopened estate summaries lying there. For much of each year, I am in London. Mr. Arkwright's office sends consolidated reports, rents, repairs, disputes, road matters, petitions judged significant enough to require my attention. Louisa looked at him. Judged by whom? He went still. By the office responsible for sending them. Then, the person who decides what you know also decides what you never see. The sentence landed hard. Dominic's face changed. That is what you believe happened here. I believe 2 petitions vanished after entering a system controlled by men who now say the village does not exist. He did not defend himself. That mattered. He pulled the bell cord. A footman appeared almost immediately. Send for Mr. Arkwright. The servant bowed and left. Louisa frowned. Your Grace, you wanted me to examine the discrepancy. I wanted you to know it exists. That is not enough. Quentin entered several minutes later, composed once more. Dominic did not invite him farther than the doorway. The quarry negotiations are suspended. Quentin's composure cracked by the smallest degree. Your Grace, may I ask on what grounds? Until I know whether the proposed land is occupied. That could delay an agreement already near completion. Then it will be delayed. The investors may withdraw. Then they will withdraw. Quentin glanced at Louisa. Because of one woman's claim, Dominic's voice became colder. Because I gave the order. Quentin lowered his head. Of course. Dominic continued. No tenant is to be removed from the disputed ground. No structure is to be altered. No gate, wall, marker, or road surface is to be changed. No penalty is to be issued against any resident there until I have seen the place myself. Quentin stepped forward. Your Grace, I strongly advise against allowing Miss Staveley to lead an inspection of private estate property based on local gossip. Dominic's eyes hardened. You may advise me when I ask. Quentin stopped. Yes, Your Grace. At first light tomorrow, I will inspect the road. A groom and Miss Pell will accompany us. Quentin's gaze flicked toward Louisa's reticule. Toward the key. She saw it. Dominic saw her see it. You noticed something, he said after Quentin had been dismissed. He looked at the key. He has done that before. In the map room, when I first took it out, Dominic became very still. Why did you not say so? Because a glance is not evidence. For the first time, something almost like approval touched his expression. No, it is not. He crossed to the desk and wrote several lines on a sheet of paper. Tomorrow, before sunrise. Louisa looked at him. You truly intend to go? Yes. Why? Dominic glanced toward the open door, then back at her. Because a man who relies on reports should occasionally discover what his reports have failed to mention. Louisa held his gaze. I did not come here to win an argument. Why did you come? Because people who exist should not have to prove they are real to the man who owns the land beneath their homes. The words struck deeper than she intended. Dominic did not look offended. He looked altered. What do you expect from me, Miss Staveley? She tightened her fingers around the reticule. I expect you to follow the road. His eyes held hers. Then he said, at first light. Louisa turned to leave. Miss Staveley, she paused. Yes, Your Grace. Bring the key. The eastern sky was only beginning to pale when Louisa reached the lower terrace at Stonebarrow Park. The next morning, damp earth darkened the gravel, and the air carried the cold smell of leaves and wet grass. A groom waited beside 2 saddled horses. Mr. Pell, the neutral estate clerk Dominic had named the day before, stood with a leather case strapped across his chest and a notebook already in hand. Dominic was there before her. He wore a dark riding coat and gloves, his expression as controlled as it had been in the map room, though his attention moved immediately to the reticule at Louisa's wrist. "You came," he said. "You asked me to. Some people confuse an invitation with a courtesy. I don't." His gaze dropped briefly. "The key?" Louisa touched the clasp. "I brought it." The smallest tension left his shoulders. Then, hoofbeats sounded from the courtyard. Quentin Arkwright appeared on horseback, accompanied by a junior estate man. Dominic's eyes hardened. "I did not ask you to join us." Quentin reined in several feet away. "I thought my knowledge of the western ground might be useful, Your Grace. If I require your knowledge, I will request it." Quentin inclined his head. "Of course." Louisa looked toward the fields. "We should go." Dominic turned to her. "You intend to walk? The first section is easier on foot." "How far?" "A little over a mile before the ground narrows." He studied her practical boots, then handed his horse's reins to the groom. "Then we walk." Quentin dismounted more slowly. The groom led the horses behind them, while Mr. Pell followed at a respectful distance. Louisa crossed the lower meadow and left the gravel estate road after several hundred yards. There was no signpost, no marker, only a break in the hedge and a narrow strip of earth, half hidden beneath nettles and fallen leaves. Dominic stopped. "Here! Here!" He looked ahead. "There is barely a path." There was enough of one for carts. Quentin stepped closer. "Years ago, perhaps." Louisa ignored him and continued. The old wheel ruts became clearer where the ground dipped. Two parallel grooves cut through the grass, softened by weather but too deep to have been made by livestock alone. Dominic crouched and pressed one gloved hand to the edge of a rut. "These are wagon tracks," Quentin gave a measured answer. "Old farm traffic, no doubt." Dominic stood. "From where?" Quentin hesitated. "One of the former outlying farms." "Which one?" "I would need to consult the older records." Dominic's gaze rested on him. "You seem to need records only when the ground contradicts you." Louisa kept walking. She did not look back, but she heard Quentin's silence. The track bent around the lower ash copse exactly as she had described. Beyond it, a mossed stone wall ran east to west. Dominic saw it. Then he saw the northward bend. His face changed almost imperceptibly. The road was no longer a woman's recollection. It was emerging from the landscape one landmark at a time. After another half-mile, they reached the gate. It stood crooked between two stone posts, its wood weathered grey with age. The hinges were newer, so was the lock. Louisa opened her reticule and removed the old iron key. Dominic watched her cross to the gate. "Mrs. Mercer said this used to open it," she said. Before someone changed the lock, Quentin folded his arms. "That proves nothing about who changed it." Louisa inserted the key. It would not turn. She tried once more, though she already knew the result. The teeth did not fit. Dominic came closer. "May I?" She withdrew the key and placed it in his palm. He examined the lock, then the key, then the iron plate fixed to the gate. "Mr. Pell." The clerk stepped forward. "Yes, Your Grace." "Record the condition of the gate, the lock, and the key. Sketch the hinge plate." Mr. Pell bent immediately to his work. Dominic rubbed a streak of mud from the metal with his thumb. A stamped mark appeared beneath the grime. Q.A. Estate Works. Quentin's initials. Louisa looked at him. Quentin's face remained composed. "A standard workshop marking," he said. "Many repairs pass through my office." Dominic did not answer. Then a sound carried across the field. Slow footsteps, several voices speaking low. Louisa turned first. Beyond the far ridge, 6 men came into view, carrying a coffin between them. Behind them walked several women in dark cloaks and 2 elderly men. No horse accompanied them. No cart. The procession moved unevenly across wet pasture because the locked gate blocked the road. Dominic went still. Louisa felt something tighten in her chest. Mrs. Mercer had told her a man at Hollin End was failing. But Louisa had not known he had died. The procession approached the lower slope. One of the carriers stumbled slightly as the ground dipped. Dominic removed his hat. Then, without asking anyone's permission, he walked toward them. Quentin spoke sharply. "Your Grace." Dominic did not stop. The mourners slowed as he approached. Most did not recognize him. Louisa saw confusion on their faces when this tall stranger in a fine coat stepped beside the man at the rear left corner. "May I help?" he asked. The carrier looked at him, startled. "It's heavy ground, sir. Then let me take part of the weight." He did. No announcement, no title, no speech. Dominic placed his hands beneath the wooden rail and walked. Louisa stood very still. She had expected him to follow the road. She had not expected him to carry what the closed road had made harder. The procession continued for several hundred yards until the ground became firmer. Only then did the elderly man at the front recognize Dominic. His face went pale. "Your Grace." The others stopped. Dominic released the rail carefully and stepped back. "Do not stop on my account." The elderly man looked toward the locked gate. Then at Louisa. "We asked them to open it." Dominic's expression sharpened. "Whom did you ask?" "The estate office." "Twice." Quentin approached at last. "There may have been a misunderstanding." The elderly man looked at him. Whatever grief had softened his face disappeared. "No misunderstanding about a locked gate, sir." Dominic turned to Mr. Pell. "Write that down." Quentin's jaw tightened. The procession continued toward the parish church, and Dominic watched until the coffin disappeared beyond the ridge. Then he put his hat back on. "Take us to Hollin End." Louisa did. Past the gate, the road widened. Weeds had grown high along the edges, but the wheel ruts became deeper. After another mile, the first chimney appeared. Smoke rose into the cold morning air. Then came a second, a third. Cottages emerged beyond a line of trees, stone-walled and small, but inhabited. Laundry hung from one yard despite the chill. A blacksmith's hammer sounded in the distance. A woman carrying a basket stopped when she saw the party approaching. 2 children stared from behind a low wall. Dominic said nothing. Louisa counted the cottages aloud as they passed. 1, 2, 3. By the time they reached the center of the hamlet, she had reached 17. Quentin's face had lost color. Dominic looked around slowly. The smithy, the chapel room, smoke above the roofs. People. Not abandoned structures, not squatters dissolving into rumor. Lives. An elderly woman came from one cottage and gripped the gatepost when she recognized Louisa. "You came back." "I said I would, Mrs. Mercer." The woman's gaze moved to Dominic. "Who is he?" Before Louisa could answer, Dominic stepped forward. "Dominic Quenby." Mrs. Mercer's eyes widened. He continued before she could curtsy. "Do not today." She stared at him. "You are the Duke." "Yes." "Then you own the road." His face changed. "I am beginning to understand that owning something is not the same as knowing what has been done with it." Quentin started to speak. Dominic turned toward him. "No. 1 word. Enough." He looked at Mr. Pell. "Record every occupied cottage, every resident willing to give a name, every receipt they are willing to show. Send a separate messenger to my solicitor before noon." Quentin stepped forward. "Your Grace, this is an extraordinary response to what may still be an informal settlement." Dominic faced him fully. 17 occupied cottages are not informal because you failed to write them down. Silence fell across the hamlet. Louisa saw Mrs. Mercer's hand tightened around the post. Dominic continued, "The quarry proposal is suspended indefinitely. No one here is to be evicted, fined, threatened, or removed while this matter is under review. The gate will be opened for access today. You will not speak to any resident alone." Quentin's expression hardened. "You are treating me as though I am accused." Dominic's voice became colder. "I am treating you as the man whose initials are on the replacement lock." Before Quentin could answer, Mrs. Mercer disappeared into her cottage and returned carrying a folded paper. Her hands trembled as she offered it to Dominic. "We paid 2 weeks ago." He unfolded the receipt. Louisa watched his eyes move across the page. At the bottom was the signature of a clerk employed under Quentin Arkwright. Dominic looked toward the 17 cottages. Then back at the receipt. "The estate map says this place was abandoned 6 years ago." Mrs. Mercer gave a tired, bitter laugh. "Then someone forgot to tell us we weren't here." By midday, the small chapel room at Hollin End had filled beyond comfort. Men stood along the walls. Women sat shoulder to shoulder on plain benches. 2 elderly tenants remained near the doorway because the air was cooler there, while several children had been sent home so the adults could speak freely. Dominic stood at the front beside a narrow table that had once held hymn books. Mr. Pell sat with his notebook open. Quentin Arkwright remained near the window, pale but composed. Louisa stood among the villagers rather than beside the Duke. Dominic noticed at once. "Miss Staveley," he said, "will you come forward?" She met his gaze. "For what purpose, Your Grace?" A few heads turned. "You brought the petition. I thought you might explain the complaints." Louisa looked around the room. Mrs. Mercer sat with both hands folded tightly over her skirt. Mrs. Henshaw, a widow with a lined face and steady eyes, occupied the second bench. Eli Foster, the village blacksmith, stood near the back with his arms crossed. Louisa turned back to Dominic. "They asked me to carry their petition, Your Grace. They did not ask me to become their voice." Something shifted in his expression. Not offense, recognition. "Then they will speak for themselves." Quentin glanced toward the villagers. "Your Grace, surely there should be some order to this. People may misunderstand payments, dates, or agreements made years ago." Dominic looked at him. "That is why Mr. Pell is taking a record. A formal inquiry into every grievance could encourage exaggeration. Then facts will expose exaggeration." Quentin said nothing more. Dominic turned to the room. "No one here will be penalized for speaking. No rent will be increased because of what is said today. No tenancy will be disturbed while this matter is examined. If anyone has a receipt, letter, notice, or other record, Mr. Pell will note it. You may keep the original unless you choose otherwise." The room remained silent. Louisa understood why. People who had been ignored for years did not suddenly trust a promise because a powerful man made it. Dominic seemed to understand that too. He did not urge them. He waited. At last, Mrs. Mercer rose. "I paid 3 shillings and 6 2 weeks ago." Quentin spoke before she reached the table. "Mrs. Mercer, I believe that amount may have been a contribution for continued occupancy, not rent." The old woman stopped. "Contribution?" "A voluntary payment for maintaining your continued use of estate land." "I did not volunteer it." A low murmur moved through the room. Quentin raised one hand. There may have been confusion in the wording. Mrs. Mercer took the receipt from her pocket and placed it on the table. "The man who came said if I didn't pay, I would lose the cottage." Dominic looked at Mr. Pell. "Record those exact words." Quentin stepped forward. Your Grace, we should be cautious about treating recollection as settled fact. Mrs. Mercer turned toward him. He said it to my face. The room grew quieter. Dominic picked up the receipt. Is this your clerk's signature? Quentin examined it. It appears similar. That was not my question. Quentin paused. Yes, it is his signature. Dominic handed the paper to Mr. Pell. Copy the details and return it to Mrs. Mercer. The old woman sat down again, but her hands no longer trembled. Dominic looked toward the next bench. Who else wishes to speak? Mrs. Henshaw rose. The gate was changed 3 years ago. Dominic turned toward her. You are certain? My husband was alive then. He took a cart along the road every week. One morning, the old key no longer fit. Louisa's fingers tightened around the reticule at her wrist. Mrs. Henshaw continued. We were told the road was no longer for village use. By whom? A man from the estate office. Quentin interjected. That could have been a temporary closure for maintenance. Mrs. Henshaw looked at him. 3 years is a long maintenance. Several people murmured agreement. Dominic raised one hand, and the room quieted. Did anyone receive written notice? No one answered. Was an alternative route provided for carts? Mrs. Henshaw shook her head. No. Was the gate opened for funerals, deliveries, or illness? We asked more than once. Dominic's face hardened. Who refused? The estate office. Quentin drew a breath. Your Grace, an office is not a person. We cannot investigate a building. Dominic turned toward him. No, we investigate the people responsible for it. Silence settled again. Louisa saw something change in the room. Not trust. Not yet. But people were beginning to believe their words would not disappear before they reached the page. Dominic asked Mr. Pell how many occupied cottages had been counted. 17, Your Grace. How many recent receipts have been presented? Mrs. Mercer's is the first original shown in this room, but several residents have already said they possess others. Dominic nodded. Mr. Pell will return tomorrow to copy every receipt you are willing to present. Originals remain with their owners. Quentin's jaw tightened. You are undermining estate authority in front of tenants. Dominic faced him fully. Estate authority is already undermined if it cannot explain where their money went. The words struck the room harder than any raised voice could have. Louisa felt something unfamiliar move through her. Not relief. Relief was too simple. It was the first fragile sense that Hollin End might no longer have to beg to be acknowledged. Then a narrow-faced man near Quentin's shoulder gave a quiet, contemptuous laugh. Louisa recognized him as Mr. Voss, one of the junior men from the estate office who had arrived after the inspection began. This whole spectacle started because a meddling rector's daughter decided she knew the estate better than those who manage it. Louisa heard him. So did everyone else. Dominic turned his head very slowly. Repeat it. Mr. Voss lost color. Your Grace? You spoke. Repeat what you said. The man swallowed. It was nothing. Then you should have no difficulty saying it again. Mr. Voss looked toward Quentin, but Quentin offered no help. I spoke carelessly, Your Grace. Dominic's voice remained calm. You insulted a woman who brought me evidence of an inhabited settlement my own records failed to acknowledge. I meant no disrespect. You showed it plainly enough. Mr. Voss lowered his eyes. Dominic pointed toward the door. Leave. The man stared. Your Grace, I serve the estate office, not in this room. Mr. Voss left without another word. Louisa felt every gaze turn toward her, and she disliked it. She had not needed vengeance. She had needed the truth heard. Dominic seemed to read that discomfort. He did not make a speech in her defense. He simply returned to the inquiry. Who changed the lock on the road gate? No one answered immediately. Then Dominic looked toward the back of the room. Mr. Foster. Eli straightened. Your Grace. Mrs. Henshaw says the lock was changed 3 years ago. Did you fit it? No. Quentin folded his arms. Then I fail to see what Mr. Foster can add. Eli looked at him. I did not fit the replacement I was asked first. The room became very still. Dominic's attention sharpened. By whom? Eli hesitated. Louisa saw the conflict in his face. Speaking had already become dangerous enough that someone might remember it later. Dominic did not rush him. You will not be punished for answering, he said. Eli gave a humorless breath. That is easy to say when the person taking offense does not live next door. Quentin's expression hardened. Dominic answered quietly. Then do not trust the promise. Trust the record. Mr. Pell is writing this down in front of witnesses. Eli looked at the open notebook, then at Louisa. Finally, he faced Dominic. A clerk from Mr. Arkwright's office came to my smithy, asked whether I had a lock heavy enough to keep carts from using the Western Road. Quentin stepped forward. You are certain of the wording? I remember, because it was strange. 3 years is a long time. Not when a man asks you to lock your own neighbors off a road they have used all their lives. A murmur passed through the room. Dominic raised his hand again. Did you supply the lock? No, I did not have one large enough. Then how do you know the request came from Mr. Arkwright's office? Because the clerk said so. Quentin's face remained controlled. Which clerk? Eli frowned. I would know him if I saw him. Convenient, Quentin said. Louisa watched Dominic's eyes cool. Do you keep written records of orders? He asked. Eli looked at him. Yes. Quentin went still. Dominic noticed. For how long? Years. Would a request like that be entered? Eli's jaw tightened. If I was asked to supply something, yes. Dominic glanced at Mr. Pell. You will accompany Mr. Foster when he searches for it. Quentin spoke quickly. Your Grace, I object to treating an old blacksmith's account book as formal estate evidence. Dominic turned toward him. You object often when records are mentioned. Quentin's face colored. Because accuracy matters. Then you should welcome the chance to examine one. Silence. Dominic looked back at Eli. Do not search alone. Why? Because if the entry exists, it matters. And if it matters, I do not intend to give anyone time to remove it. The meaning settled over the room. Louisa saw Quentin's hand close slowly at his side. Dominic saw it too. Eli gave a single nod. Then Mr. Pell comes with me. Yes. Dominic looked toward the open doorway, then back to the villagers. This inquiry is not finished, but until it is, no one here is to be fined, removed, threatened, or privately questioned by Mr. Arkwright, or anyone acting under his authority. Quentin's composure cracked at last. You speak as though I am already guilty. Dominic's voice became colder. I speak as though your initials are on a replacement lock, your clerk's signature is on a recent receipt, and your office requested a fitting strong enough to stop carts from using a road my map claims does not exist. No one moved. Then Eli Foster reached for his cap and looked toward Mr. Pell. We should nodded. Find the book. Eli opened the door, but before stepping out, he turned back. Your Grace. Dominic looked at him. Eli's voice was low. I remember something else about the man who came to my smithy. Quentin went still. What? Dominic asked. Eli looked directly at him. He said, Mr. Arkwright wanted the gate secured before winter. By late afternoon, rain had begun to tap steadily against the windows of Stonebarrow Park, and the map room had taken on the grey, enclosed stillness of a place where too many facts were beginning to disagree. Louisa had returned from Hollin End with Dominic after Mr. Pell accompanied Eli Foster to search for the old order book. The blacksmith had found it exactly where he said he would, wrapped in cloth inside a wooden chest behind the smithy. The entry was there. 3 years earlier, a clerk from Quentin Arkwright's office had requested a lock strong enough to prevent carts from using the Western Road. Eli had declined because he did not stock one large enough. Beneath the entry, in his own cramped hand, he had written a short note to remind himself who had made the request: Arkwright Estate Office. Mr. Pell had copied the page in Eli's presence, witnessed it, and left the original with the blacksmith. Now another document lay open on the long walnut table. It was older than the estate map, yellowed at the edges and heavier in the hand. The parish rector had sent it under cover of a clerk. The 1838 tithe map. Dominic stood over it with his coat removed, one hand resting beside the western boundary. "Here," he said. Louisa stepped closer. His finger rested on a thin inked line running beyond the lower ash copse, bending north beside the stone wall, then continuing toward a marked cluster of buildings. Beside the line were 3 words: Old Hollin Road. Louisa stopped breathing for a moment. There it is. Yes, Dominic moved his finger to the buildings. And the settlement. She counted the structures marked there. 16. There are 17 now. One may have been added later. Louisa looked toward the current estate map, spread several feet away. On that newer parchment, the same ground was clean, too clean. No road, no cottages, only western pasture and the proposed quarry site. Dominic carried the lamp nearer and angled it low. Under stronger light, the faint scars in the parchment became impossible to dismiss. Long scraping marks crossed the place where Old Hollin Road should have run. The western boundary had been redrawn in a slightly darker ink. Louisa said nothing. She did not need to. Dominic's face had hardened. The cartographer who prepared the current map lives in Nottinghamshire, he said. My solicitor has sent someone to question him. And Mr. Arkwright. Restricted. Dominic looked at the closed door of the adjoining office. He may continue only necessary duties. He cannot enter this room, access the older ledgers, remove correspondence, or speak privately to any resident of Hollin End. He will say you have judged him already. He has said as much. Louisa looked at the tithe map again. And have you? Dominic did not answer quickly. I have judged that there are 17 occupied cottages where my records say there are none. I have judged that rent has been collected by men under his office. I have judged that his initials are on a replacement lock. His clerk's request is in a blacksmith's order book, and the road was scraped from a map prepared under his supervision. He paused. That is enough to justify restraint. Not enough to justify pretending I know more than I do. Louisa looked at him. That sounds uncomfortable. It is. Good. The word left her before she considered whether it was wise. Dominic turned toward her. For 1 second, she wondered whether she had gone too far. Then he said, "You are angry with me." "I am angry that Mrs. Mercer waited 3 years for someone to ask where her money went." "That includes me." "Yes." He accepted the answer without flinching. That unsettled her more than defensiveness would have. Dominic moved toward a second table where Mr. Pell had left several bundles of estate papers. "There is something else." Louisa followed. He opened a narrow correspondence register. Mr. Pell compared the dates of the letters you described with the estate's incoming correspondence records. "And there are gaps." She looked down. Rows of dates, names, subjects, and routing marks filled the pages. Then, twice within the months Louisa had named, the numbering skipped. One entry ended. The next began with a later number. Could pages be missing? She asked. Not pages, entries. Dominic touched the margin. The numbering continues as though something was received, but no sender, subject, or destination was written down. Louisa felt cold despite the fire. One of those dates matches the first petition. Within 2 days. And the second? There is another unexplained gap 3 weeks later. She looked up. So the petitions may have reached Stonebarrow. May have. And someone failed to record where they went. Yes. Louisa's gaze returned to the register. Or someone decided not to. Dominic became very still. That is possible. Who controls incoming estate correspondence? He looked at her. She already knew the answer. Mr. Arkwright's office. Silence held between them. At last, Dominic walked back to the maps. I have spent half my life believing bad systems fail because records are incomplete. Louisa followed more slowly. Sometimes they do. Missing figures, missing inspections, missing signatures. I thought the solution was always better records. Sometimes it is. You do not sound convinced. She stopped beside the current estate map. Sometimes records are complete. They simply serve the wrong man. The words landed harder than she intended. Dominic looked at the blank space where Hollin End should have been. And you believe that is what happened here? I believe someone understood that if the village vanished from paper, the people living there would become easier to ignore. That is a serious conclusion. So is collecting money from people you claim do not exist. He looked at her then, no anger, no irritation. Only a kind of attention that made Louisa more aware of her own breathing than she wished to be. You do not become polite when you reach a title. Would you prefer that I did? No. The answer came immediately. I have had enough politeness for one lifetime. She almost smiled. Almost. Dominic reached for the old iron key, then stopped before touching it. May I? The question surprised her. He was asking permission to hold an object she had already placed on his map, yet the fact that he asked mattered. Louisa opened her reticule, removed the key, and placed it in his palm. Yes, their hands did not touch. Barely an inch separated them. Dominic examined the worn teeth, then set the key beside the tithe map where Old Hollin Road crossed the western boundary. Mrs. Mercer said it belonged to the chapel room. Yes, anyone who needed the gate could use it. Then it belonged to Hollin End. That is how she sees it. Dominic's thumb moved lightly over the iron bow. And you, I think some things should not belong to the person with the greatest power to claim them. A silence followed. It did not feel hostile. That made it more dangerous. Louisa bent toward the old map to read a faded note near the boundary. The lamplight was poor from that angle. Without speaking, Dominic lifted the lamp and shifted it closer to her side of the table. The gesture was so small that she might have missed it if she had not spent years noticing what people did when they thought no one was watching. She read the note. Then another. When she finally straightened, she saw the untouched tray near the window. Bread, cold meat, and cheese. Dominic had not eaten. Neither had she. Louisa looked at him. You should eat. His brows rose. Is that an order? No. I have learned from your example how badly those can go. For the first time, a real hint of amusement appeared in his face. Cruel, accurate. She crossed to the tray, broke a piece of bread, and set half of it on the plate nearest him. Dominic looked at the bread, then at her. You are feeding the man whose estate ignored 17 households. I am preventing the man investigating it from becoming useless before dinner. A practical distinction. An important one. He took the bread. Something in the room changed. Not enough to name, Enough to notice. Louisa returned to the map. Dominic ate without ceremony and resumed comparing the old boundary lines. After several minutes, footsteps sounded in the corridor. Lady Sabina appeared in the doorway. Her gaze moved first to Dominic, then to Louisa, then to the old iron key resting between them beside the tithe map. She also saw the divided bread on the tray. Her expression remained perfectly composed. Only her eyes changed. "How very industrious," she said. Dominic did not move away from the table. "The tithe map confirms the road." Sabina stepped inside. Maps are curious things. They can make a line seem more important than it was. Louisa looked at her. People used that line to reach their homes. Sabina's gaze settled on her. "And now, Miss Staveley, everyone appears to be using it to reach something else." Dominic's face hardened. "What does that mean?" "Nothing yet." Sabina's smile was faint. But county society has a remarkable appetite for unfinished explanations. She turned toward the door. Before leaving, she looked once more at the old key lying between them. Then she was gone. Louisa waited until her footsteps faded. Was that a warning? Dominic looked toward the empty doorway. Yes. For whom? His gaze returned to her. "I suspect we are about to find out." By the following evening, Lady Sabina's warning had begun to prove itself. The county dinner at Stonebarrow Park had been planned weeks before the discovery of Hollin End, and cancelling it now would have created more curiosity than proceeding. Neighbouring landowners, clergy, magistrates, and several families of consequence arrived beneath the high lamps of the entrance hall, dressed for an ordinary social gathering and carrying the unmistakable attention of people who had heard something unusual. Louisa came with Mrs. Harland, the rector's wife, because Dominic had formally requested her presence as the witness whose petition had begun the estate inquiry. That explanation was proper. It was also useless against imagination. The moment Louisa entered the drawing room, she felt conversation thin around her. Not stop. That would have been almost merciful. Voices softened instead. Two women near the fireplace glanced from Louisa to Dominic, who stood across the room, speaking with a magistrate. A gentleman who had ignored her at parish meetings now bowed with exaggerated warmth. Louisa returned the courtesy and moved on. Mrs. Harland leaned closer. "You may leave whenever you choose." "I know. There is no dishonour in refusing to serve as entertainment." Louisa looked across the room. Quentin Arkwright stood near a window, speaking quietly with a landowner. He had been restricted from the older records, the map room, and private contact with Hollin End residents. Yet he wore the expression of an injured servant, enduring suspicion with dignity. Lady Sabina stood nearby in pearl grey silk, gracious and perfectly composed. "No," Louisa said, "but there would be danger in teaching them that a woman disappears when they begin whispering." Mrs. Harland's mouth softened. "Your father would have approved." "My father would have advised me not to provoke anyone before soup." "Then wait until the fish course." Louisa almost smiled. Dinner began without incident. Dominic had seated her midway down the table, neither hidden nor placed conspicuously close to him. Mrs. Harland sat at her side. Lady Sabina occupied the place of honour near Dominic. Quentin sat farther down, where he spoke with careful restraint about harvest yields and autumn rents, as though no village had vanished from the estate map and no blacksmith's order book connected his office to a lock designed to keep carts off a road. The first attack came after the second course. Lady Sabina lifted her wineglass and looked toward Louisa with refined curiosity. "How extraordinary that Miss Staveley knows roads His Grace himself has never seen." The nearest conversations quieted. Louisa placed her fork down. It is less extraordinary when one has lived nearby most of one's life. Sabina smiled. Of course, though estate roads seem an unusual field of expertise for a lady. I claim no expertise. No, only memory and remarkable confidence. A gentleman farther down the table gave a quiet laugh. Dominic looked at him. The laughter died. Louisa kept her attention on Sabina. Confidence becomes necessary when quieter methods fail. Sabina's expression did not change. How admirably phrased. Sir Edmund Vale, a neighbouring gentleman whose curiosity regularly arrived before his judgment, leaned back in his chair. Perhaps Miss Staveley can settle a question for us then. How many times did she accompany his Grace into these secluded country lanes? Mrs. Harland stiffened. Louisa felt the insult pass through the room before anyone spoke. Dominic set down his glass. Once, Sir Edmund blinked. Dominic continued, at my request, in daylight, with a groom and an estate clerk present. I meant no offence, Your Grace. Then you chose an unfortunate way to express yourself. Sir Edmund coloured. Naturally, it was only curiosity. Dominic's voice remained calm. Miss Staveley went where I asked her to go. Anyone wishing to question the propriety of that decision may question me. Silence followed. Louisa should have felt protected. Part of her did. Another part understood immediately what the room would do with such a defence. Dominic had not merely corrected Sir Edmund. He had publicly placed his authority beside her name. By morning, some would call it honourable. Others would call it interest. Quentin saw it too. He lowered his gaze with the solemn patience of a man watching his master lose judgment. The expression made Louisa angrier than open mockery would have. A clergyman seated 2 places beyond Quentin cleared his throat, perhaps hoping to redirect the conversation. The old parish carriers may prove more useful than gossip, Your Grace. In my former living, every delivery route was marked in a separate ledger. Letters to an estate office rarely vanished without leaving some trace with the carrier. Quentin's fingers tightened around the stem of his glass. The movement was small. Louisa saw it. Dominic did too. Lady Sabina spoke before the clergyman could continue. How fortunate that rural England records every parcel as though it were a matter of state. Her tone drew polite laughter from 2 guests. Surely we needn't turn dinner into an audit of old carrier habits. The clergyman smiled uncertainly. I only meant that such records can be surprisingly persistent. Quentin lifted his glass and drank. Too quickly, Louisa looked toward Dominic. His expression revealed nothing, but his eyes had sharpened. She understood at once the petitions, the unexplained gaps in the estate correspondence register. If a parish carrier had kept a route ledger, the missing letters might have left evidence outside Quentin's control. Sabina had tried to bury the idea under wit. In doing so, she had made it more important. The rest of dinner passed with fewer direct questions, though the whispers did not stop. They merely became more skillful. In the drawing room afterward, a woman Louisa barely knew approached her near the windows. You must find all this attention overwhelming. What attention? Louisa asked. The woman smiled. Please, there is no need for modesty. Then there is also no need to pretend we are discussing the estate inquiry. The smile faded slightly. I only meant that His Grace has been unusually attentive. To evidence? To you? Louisa looked at her directly. I came to Stonebarrow because people were being ignored. If the county prefers to turn that into a courtship story, it says more about the county than it does about me. The woman retreated soon afterward. Dominic had been speaking with the magistrate across the room. He had not heard every word, but he had seen enough. Louisa stepped into the open corridor for air, with the drawing-room door remaining behind her and servants moving within sight. Dominic followed only after several moments. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Yes." That answer was too quick. So was your defense at dinner. His brows drew together. "You objected to it." "No, I object to what people will do with it." They were already speaking. Now they will speak differently. "Does that matter?" Louisa looked at him. "To you, perhaps less than to me." The rebuke landed. Dominic did not defend himself. "You are right." She had not expected immediate agreement. It unsettled her more than argument might have. "I can survive people saying you are interested in me," she said. "That is not the insult that matters." Dominic waited. "The insult is that they cannot imagine a woman challenging a duke because conscience required it. They assume I must want something from you. Marriage, position, attention, as though no unmarried woman could possibly speak against power unless she hoped to climb closer to it." His face hardened. "Not at her. I know why you came." Louisa looked toward the drawing room, where laughter had resumed. "That may not be enough." What would be enough? Truth before reputation, evidence before rank, and the courage not to let society turn a serious matter into a joke because a woman carried the first warning. Dominic held her gaze. "You have that courage. I have less to lose than you." "Do you believe that?" "I know it." Before he could answer, Lady Sabina appeared at the far end of the corridor. She approached slowly, every fold of her gown controlled, every expression composed. Dominic's face cooled. "Aunt, Dominic." Her gaze moved to Louisa. "Miss Staveley, may I borrow a word?" Dominic did not move. Sabina smiled, privately, though naturally within sight of the servants. Louisa answered before Dominic could. "Certainly." Sabina led her several steps away. Her voice remained low. "You are an intelligent woman. I hope you understand that intelligence does not protect reputation." Louisa said nothing. "By breakfast," Sabina continued, "every drawing room in Derbyshire will say you found a vanished road only to trap a duke at the end of it." Louisa met her eyes. "And who will have given them that idea?" Sabina's smile sharpened. "My dear, ideas like that require no assistance, only opportunity." She turned and walked away. Louisa watched her go. Then she remembered how quickly Sabina had silenced the clergyman when he mentioned the carrier route ledger. The warning no longer sounded like prediction. It sounded like preparation. Behind her, Dominic said. "What did she say?" Louisa looked toward the crowded drawing room, then toward the corridor where Sabina had disappeared. "I think your aunt is doing more than listening to the whispers." Dominic's expression changed. "What do you mean?" Louisa thought of Quentin's hand tightening around his glass, Sabina changing the subject, and two missing petitions that might still exist somewhere outside the estate office. I think she may be helping them choose what to say. By the following evening, the whispers had grown teeth. The county assembly rooms were bright, with chandeliers, music, silk, polished shoes, and the carefully concealed excitement of people who believed they were about to witness someone else's ruin. Louisa entered beside Mrs. Harland and felt the room notice her. Not openly. That would have been kinder. Conversations thinned by a shade. Two women lowered their voices. A gentleman who had greeted her warmly at Stonebarrow Park now bowed without meeting her eyes. Across the room, Dominic stood near a magistrate. Lady Sabina was already present. So was Quentin Arkwright, dressed with perfect restraint and wearing the expression of a loyal servant, unfairly wounded by suspicion. Louisa saw Mr. Voss near the service entrance before he moved away. He was speaking to a coachman she recognized by sight, Tom Weller. The man often drove hired carriages for local gatherings. Tom's shoulders were tense. Mr. Voss leaned close, said something brief, then stepped back. Tom looked toward the crowded room, then toward Quentin. Louisa saw it. So did Mrs. Harland. "Do you know that man?" Mrs. Harland asked quietly. The coachman, yes. Not well. He looks ill. He looks afraid. Music began. Guests shifted toward the floor. Dominic crossed the room when he saw Louisa. He did not hurry, but by the time she reached the chairs near the wall, he was beside her. "Mrs. Harland, Miss Staveley." "Your Grace," Mrs. Harland replied. Louisa inclined her head. "You came," Dominic said. "I was invited. That was not what I meant. I know." His gaze rested on her face. "Did you receive more letters?" "2. I received 4. "Then you are still winning." Something almost like amusement touched his expression, but it vanished quickly. "I would rather lose." Before Louisa could answer, Lady Sabina approached. "Miss Staveley, you look remarkably composed." "Should I not?" "That depends on how much you have heard." "Enough to know that imagination travels faster than evidence." Sabina smiled. "How fortunate that you remain confident." Mrs. Harland stepped closer. "Louisa did not need rescuing. Did you wish to ask me something, Lady Sabina?" "Only whether you remember precisely how long you were beyond the main estate road with my nephew." Nearby conversations slowed. Louisa answered evenly. "I remember that a groom and Mr. Pell accompanied us." "At every moment?" "Yes." A voice came from behind Sabina. "Begging your pardon, miss. Not every moment." The room changed. Tom Weller stood near the doorway, hat in his hands. Louisa looked at him. Dominic turned from beside her. Quentin did not move. Mr. Voss watched Tom with unnerving stillness. Lady Sabina appeared mildly surprised. "Mr. Weller," she said, "did you say something?" Tom swallowed. "I drove a supply cart that morning, my lady. Saw His Grace and Miss Staveley leave the lower road." Dominic's expression sharpened. "Continue." Tom looked at the floor. There was a stretch where they were out of sight of the groom and clerk. Louisa felt the first cold shock. "That is false." Tom's hands tightened around his hat. "I'm only saying what I saw, miss." "From how far away?" He hesitated. Quentin spoke quietly. "Surely the man can give his recollection without being intimidated." Dominic's gaze cut toward him. "He will answer the question." Tom licked his lips. "Perhaps a quarter mile." Louisa looked at him. "Then you could not see whether the groom and clerk were behind the hedge or 20 yards away." A murmur spread through the room. Tom shifted. "I saw what I saw." "Did you see us alone?" Louisa asked. He hesitated again. "I saw you out of sight of the others." "That was not my question." Tom's face reddened. Mr. Voss stared at him. Quentin remained expressionless. Louisa understood then that Tom was not telling a complete truth. Perhaps not a complete lie either. Something more dangerous. A shaped recollection. Lady Sabina gave a soft sigh. "This is precisely why propriety exists. Not because innocence is impossible, but because appearances can destroy it." Dominic stepped forward. For one heartbeat, Louisa thought he would challenge every person in the room. Instead, he looked around and saw what she saw. Curiosity, calculation, doubt. People who had already chosen the more entertaining version. His jaw tightened. "This ends now." The room fell silent. Louisa turned toward him. Dominic's voice was calm, authoritative, final, until the inquiry is complete. "Miss Staveley will no longer accompany field inspections or private examinations of the disputed ground. She will withdraw temporarily from direct participation until the facts are established." For one terrible moment, Louisa thought she had misunderstood him. No one else did. Lady Sabina lowered her eyes. Quentin went very still. Across the room, a woman whispered behind her fan. Louisa felt the humiliation spread not as heat, but cold. He believed he was protecting her. She knew it instantly. He had removed her from gossip, from danger, from proximity to him. He had also removed her from the work she had begun. He had given the room exactly what it wanted, proof that she had overstepped, proof that even the Duke now wished her gone. "Miss Staveley," Dominic said, quieter, "this is temporary." Louisa looked at him. Temporary erasure is still erasure. His face changed. "That is not what I am doing, isn't it?" Her voice did not tremble. She was grateful for that. "You followed the road, Your Grace. Now you are erasing me from it." The words struck the room harder than any raised voice could have. Dominic's expression faltered. "I am trying to shield you from further damage. By telling everyone here that I must step aside. By making certain they cannot use the inquiry to ruin you." Louisa looked around the assembly. "They do not need to ruin me now. You have made me unnecessary. That is not true. Then, why am I the one being removed?" Silence. Dominic had no answer quickly enough. That was answer enough. She could endure strangers, turning conscience into ambition. She had expected that. What she had not expected was that the first man who truly listened would use his authority to silence her in the name of protection. Lady Sabina stepped forward. "My carriage can take you home." Louisa turned toward her. "No. Miss Staveley, surely. No." She looked at Mrs. Harland. "May I leave with you?" Mrs. Harland's face was pale with anger, but her voice was steady. "Of course." Dominic moved once, then stopped himself. "Louisa." It was the first time he had used her given name. The room heard it. So did she. She looked back at him. Not here. His hand lowered to his side. Louisa left the assembly beside Mrs. Harland without hurrying. She did not look at Sabina. She did not look at Quentin. Near the service entrance, Tom Weller stood pressed against the wall. He avoided her eyes. Mr. Voss did not. His expression was watchful. Louisa saw enough, not proof, a pattern. At Stonebarrow Park, Dominic remained only long enough to order Miss Pell to question Tom formally the next morning and to forbid any estate officer from contacting him first. By 11, Dominic had returned to the estate. He had barely entered his study when a groom arrived, breathless from the western road. "Your Grace." Dominic turned. "What happened?" "The old road marker is gone." Dominic went still. The groom continued. "And the gate, sir? Someone tried to burn it." Within minutes, Dominic was on horseback. He reached the lower field before dawn, with 2 men carrying lanterns behind him. The old stone marker that had stood near the bend was missing. Only disturbed earth remained. At the gate, one side of the weathered wood was blackened. Though rain had prevented the fire from spreading far enough to destroy the ironwork, the new lock remained. So did Quentin's stamped hinge plate. Dominic dismounted and moved toward the empty stone base. Something coarse caught the lantern light near the mud. A short length of rope, frayed at one end, snagged beneath a broken edge of stone. Mr. Pell, who had joined them, crouched beside it. Estate work carts use rope like this. Dominic looked toward the gate, then toward the track disappearing into darkness. His own words from the assembly returned to him with brutal clarity: temporary, protective, necessary. While he had tried to control appearances, someone else had used the delay to erase evidence. He had believed caution would protect Louisa. Instead, caution had protected the person who needed one more night. For the first time since the inquiry began, Dominic understood that he had not merely hurt her. He had helped the wrong man. Louisa did not hide. By 9 o'clock, the morning after the assembly, while half the county was probably deciding whether she had been rejected by the Duke of Ormsleigh, compromised by him, or foolish enough to imagine herself important to his inquiry, she was walking toward Holland End beside Mrs. Harland. The rector's wife carried a stout umbrella and the expression of a woman prepared to use it against anyone who questioned propriety. Louisa carried her reticule, the old iron key, and a determination steadier than anger. The night had left the fields wet. Smoke rose from the cottages ahead. When Louisa reached the damaged gate, she stopped. One side of the wood was blackened. The replacement lock remained. The iron hinge plate still bore the stamped mark of Quentin Arkwright's office. Beyond it, the place where the old road marker had stood was empty. Only disturbed earth remained. Mrs. Harland stared at the gap. Someone was frightened. Yes, Louisa touched neither the gate nor the stone base. And now we know fear moves faster than official caution. Mrs. Harland looked at her. You should have sent for the Duke. Louisa turned toward Holland End. He knows what happened. That was not what I meant. I know. Then what are you choosing? Louisa tightened her hold on the reticule to keep more from disappearing. They found Ely Foster at the smithy. The rhythmic strike of his hammer stopped the moment he saw them. He removed his leather apron and came outside, his face drawn from lack of sleep. Miss Staveley, Mrs. Harland, his gaze moved toward the damaged gate. You saw it? Yes, Louisa said. Did anything else happen last night? Ely hesitated. Someone came to my door. Mrs. Harland stiffened. Who? Didn't give a name. His voice lowered. Said there was no reason for an honest man to involve himself in disputes between his betters. Louisa felt a chill unrelated to the morning air. Was that all? He said old memories can be mistaken. Said people who repeat them too often sometimes regret the trouble they cause. Mrs. Harland's mouth tightened. That sounds like a threat. Not in words. Careful men rarely use the dangerous words, Louisa said. Ely nodded once. I thought the same. He led them into the small room behind the smithy. The air smelled of coal, metal, and old paper. From beneath a loose floorboard, he pulled out a thick order book wrapped in cloth. I moved it before dawn. Louisa looked at him. Why there? Because yesterday it was in a wooden chest. Last night I decided wood was too obvious. He set the book on a narrow table and turned through the pages carefully. Here. The entry was exactly as Mr. Pell had copied it the day before. 3 years earlier, a request from Arkwright Estate Office. A lock strong enough to stop carts from using the Western Road. Ely had declined because he did not carry one large enough. Beneath the entry was the note identifying the office. Louisa read it again, then looked at him. Did the man who came last night ask about this book? Not directly. Did he know you kept one? He knew enough to say I should be careful what I claimed to remember. Mrs. Harland glanced toward the doorway. Then the book is not safe here. No, Louisa said, but neither should it vanish into Stonebarrow Park. Ely looked at her. What do you suggest? Before she could answer, footsteps sounded outside. Dominic appeared in the doorway, with Mr. Pell several yards behind him, and a groom waiting farther off. Mud marked the Duke's boots. His coat was damp at the shoulders. He looked as though he had not slept. Louisa became still. Dominic saw it and stopped immediately. May I come in? The question surprised Ely first, then Mrs. Harland. Louisa answered only with her eyes on him. It is Mr. Foster's smithy. Dominic looked at Ely. May I? Ely gave a slow nod. Yes, Your Grace. Dominic entered but did not move toward Louisa. He looked first at the book. Is that the original? Yes, Ely said. Someone came to his door last night, Louisa added. Dominic's expression hardened. Who? Eli repeated the conversation. Dominic listened without interruption. When he finished, Dominic turned to Mr. Pell. You will copy the entry again here, mister. Foster keeps the original. A second copy goes to Mr. Quenby. A third remains with you. Mr. Pell nodded. Yes, Your Grace. Dominic looked back at Eli. No one from the estate office is to question you privately. If anyone comes again, send word through Mrs. Harland or Mr. Pell, not through Arkwright's office. Eli gave a short breath. That sounds like an order. Dominic glanced at Louisa. I have recently learned to be more careful with those. She felt the words before she wanted to. Not because they were clever, because he had not tried to hide the lesson. Mrs. Harland quietly moved toward Mr. Pell and the order book, leaving Louisa and Dominic several feet of space while remaining fully within sight. Dominic did not use the privacy immediately. You came back, he said. Yes, after last night. Especially after last night. Pain crossed his face, brief but unmistakable. I owe you an apology. Louisa said nothing, he continued. Not for failing to defend your reputation. I did defend it. I owe you an apology for believing that gave me the right to decide what you should lose in order to keep it. Her fingers tightened around the reticule. You removed me before everyone who wanted me removed. Yes, you made their accusation look reasonable. Yes, you silenced me in the name of protecting me. He did not look away. Yes. The simplicity of his answers unsettled her more than justification would have. Dominic took one slow breath. I protected your reputation by removing your choice. I was wrong. Louisa felt the words land where anger had been holding itself upright since the assembly. She did not forgive him, not yet. But she believed he understood the wound. That was different. Then do not apologize by giving me another order. I won't. You cannot remove me when I embarrass the inquiry and restore me when I become useful again. I know. Do you? I didn't yesterday. The honesty struck harder than defense would have. He lowered his voice. What do you need? Louisa had not expected that question. Not what will satisfy you. Not what can I do for you. What do you need? She looked toward Eli's book. That evidence preserved. It will be copied here and secured separately. The villagers have more receipts. Mr. Pell will copy everyone without taking originals from their owners. No rent penalties. Suspended. No private questioning by Mr. Arkwright or anyone acting under him. Already forbidden. Louisa met his eyes. And when this becomes public, I speak for myself. He answered without hesitation. Yes, even if what I say embarrasses your house. A pause. Brief. Real. Especially then. Something inside her loosened, though not enough to become trust. Dominic seemed to understand. He did not step closer. There is more, he said. The rope found near the missing marker is the kind used on estate work carts. Mr. Pell is checking hire and maintenance records, so whoever removed it may have used estate equipment. Possibly. And the gate. Whoever tried to burn it failed to destroy the hinge plate. Louisa looked toward the road outside. Then they were not trying to frighten us. They were trying to erase proof. That is what I believe. Good. Dominic's brows lifted slightly. Good. Fear makes people careless. He almost smiled. You are not easily discouraged. I was discouraged last night. The truth surprised them both. Louisa looked at him fully. I could endure strangers saying I wanted your title. I expected that. What I did not expect was that the first man who truly listened would become the man who told me to step aside. Dominic's face changed. I know. No, you know now. Yes, he accepted that too. Before either could say more, a boy from the village approached carrying a folded letter. For Miss Staveley. Louisa took it. There was no family seal, only her name written in an elegant hand she recognized immediately. Lady Sabina Dunstan. Dominic's expression cooled. You don't need to open it here. Louisa broke the seal. The letter was brief. Lady Sabina expressed sorrow over the unfortunate gossip and offered Louisa an annual income sufficient for modest independence, a cottage in another county, and suitable introductions, provided she left Derbyshire quietly until the unpleasant attention had passed. No confession, no direct threat, only generosity arranged around disappearance. Louisa read the final sentence twice. There are truths which cost more to reveal than to bury. Dominic watched her face. What did she offer? An annuity. His jaw hardened. For what? Louisa folded the letter carefully, for silence dressed as concern. She handed it to him only after he held out his hand and stopped. May I? Louisa gave it over. His eyes moved down the page. When he finished, he was very still. She will answer for this. Louisa shook her head. Not yet. Dominic looked at her. Why? Because an offer is not proof of guilt. A faint, painful recognition crossed his face. You learned that from me. Not in the way you intended. He returned the letter. Then what do you suggest? Louisa slipped it into her reticule beside the old iron key. We find out why Lady Sabina believes the truth is expensive. Dominic held her gaze. Louisa looked toward the damaged gate, the missing marker, and the cottages beyond. Do not make me regret the word. His answer was quiet. I will try not to. Sewer. The rent register had a heading for the western ground. Beneath it, every line was blank. Louisa stood beside the long table in the smaller estate office at Stonebarrow Park, and looked from that empty column to the 16 copied rent receipts arranged beside it. 16 cottages had now produced evidence of payment. 17 cottages stood occupied at Hollin End, yet according to the official register, no rent had been received, because no recognized tenants existed there. Dominic stood across from her, with Mr. Quenby, his solicitor, and Mr. Pell. Mrs. Harland had accompanied Louisa to the estate, but remained in a nearby sitting room. Quentin Arkwright was not permitted inside. The room was quiet enough that Louisa could hear the faint movement of paper beneath Mr. Quenby's hand. Someone left space for Hollin End, she said. Dominic looked at the heading. Yes, and then made certain nothing was written beneath it. That is how it appears. Louisa touched neither the register nor the receipts. How many years? Mr. Quenby answered. 6 in this volume. The same 6 years, during which the current estate map says Hollin End was abandoned. Yes. Louisa looked at Dominic. Then the empty column is not a mistake. He did not defend the possibility. No. Mr. Pell opened another ledger. The money did enter the accounts, Miss Staveley, just not under Hollin End. Louisa frowned. Where? He turned several pages. The entries were brief. Western boundary maintenance, drainage, cartage, stone repairs, timber work. The sums varied, but several closely matched the amounts recorded on the duplicate receipts. False maintenance expenses? She asked. Mr. Quenby folded his hands. That is the likely explanation. Not every payment can yet be traced directly, but the pattern is consistent. Rent was collected from people the estate claimed did not exist, then hidden under repairs that may never have happened. Dominic's expression hardened. Yes. Louisa looked down at the blank column again. Someone had not forgotten Hollin End. Forgetfulness was careless. This was clean, deliberate, useful. The village was worth more to someone as an empty space, she said. Dominic's gaze moved to a separate packet on the table. That is what the quarry draft suggests. He unfolded the proposed lease and turned it toward her. Louisa read until one phrase stopped her. Unoccupied land without dependent households. There are 17 households. I know. The wording removes them before the quarry even begins. Mr. Quenby nodded. Land described as unoccupied is easier to lease. No recognized households means fewer obligations, fewer objections, and fewer questions about access or displacement. Louisa looked at Dominic. So, Hollin disappeared twice. Once from the map, once from the agreement that would profit from its absence. Yes. His answer was quiet. She saw the cost of it in his face. Not because the estate had been embarrassed, because he was beginning to understand that the deception had been built around assumptions he himself had accepted. Mr. Pell placed a smaller leather ledger beside the quarry draft. There is more. Dominic did not look at the book. Show her. Mr. Pell opened it. The entries were not from the main estate accounts. Several payments had passed through discretionary accounts controlled by Quentin's office. Some had been directed toward obligations connected to Lady Sabina Dunstan, widow of the late Lord Dunstan and Dominic's maternal aunt. Louisa read the figures twice. Did she receive Hollin rent directly? Mr. Quenby answered. We cannot prove that. Then what can you prove? That funds moved through accounts Mr. Arkwright controlled, that some of those funds reduced debts and household obligations, from which Lady Sabina benefited, and that she had reason to prefer those accounts remained unexamined. Louisa thought of the letter in her reticule, an annuity, a cottage elsewhere, suitable introductions. There are truths which cost more to reveal than to bury. She knew something. Dominic's jaw tightened. Enough to offer you money to leave Derbyshire. That proves fear, not the extent of knowledge. He looked at her. You are defending her? No. I am refusing to become careless because she was cruel to me. Something moved in his expression. Respect, perhaps, or shame at how easily he himself had once wanted quick answers. Mr. Quenby produced another statement. The cartographer has also been located. Dominic took the paper. He confirms that he removed Old Hollin Road and the settlement notation after receiving written instructions through Mr. Arkwright's office. Louisa's breath slowed. Does the instruction survive? No, Dominic said. The cartographer did not keep it. Convenient, yes, but he remembers the office and the wording. The western ground had been reclassified as disused estate property. Louisa looked from the old tithe map to the blank register. A road erased, a village erased, rent collected, land called empty, quarry profit waiting. Mr. Quenby said, that is the chain we can establish. And the motive? Dominic looked toward the smaller ledger. Money, control, concealment, perhaps all three. Mr. Pell cleared his throat. There is one more entry. He turned several pages in the maintenance account. The night the old road marker disappeared, a work cart was hired from the estate yard. Dominic's attention sharpened. Louisa stepped closer. The entry was brief. 1 cart, 2 hours after dusk, western boundary work. Payment authorized through a discretionary maintenance account. Recipient identified only by initials. Which initials? Louisa asked. Mr. Pell pointed. J. B. Do we know who that is? Not yet. Dominic's eyes remained on the page. And the rope? The same kind issued with estate work carts. Louisa felt a cold certainty settle into place. Then, whoever removed the marker may have used estate equipment and been paid through an account Quentin controlled. Mr. Quenby raised one finger. May have. We are not yet entitled to say more. Not yet, Louisa repeated. Dominic looked at her. The phrase had become familiar between them. Once it had sounded like uncertainty. Now it sounded like refusal to stop. By late afternoon, Mr. Quenby and Mr. Pell had left to secure copies and trace the coded payment. The office door remained open. A footman crossed the corridor beyond. Louisa stood near the window, looking toward the western fields under a lowering grey sky. Dominic remained by the table. "You should sit," he said. "You have told me that before. You ignored me then too. I am consistent." I had noticed. The faint warmth in his voice surprised her. When she turned, he was holding the old iron key. She had given it to Mr. Pell that morning. So, its shape and measurements could be entered into the evidence record. Dominic held it carefully, as though its small weight demanded more respect than its size suggested. "May I keep this until the public record is complete?" he asked. Louisa crossed the room. "You may borrow it." His eyes lifted to hers. "Borrow it? You may not own it." Something softened in his expression. "I would not dare. You are a duke. Daring to own things seems to be part of the position." "So I am learning." She almost smiled. Almost. Dominic looked down at the key. "I believed the map because it was mine." Louisa said nothing. "I trusted the records because they belonged to my estate. I trusted the office because it operated under my name." His fingers closed around the iron bow. "That is the ugliest truth in this room." "No." He looked at her. "The ugliest truth is that someone knew you would." The words struck him. Louisa saw it. Quentin had not merely hidden facts from a distant duke. He had understood exactly which facts Dominic was likely to trust and which voices he was likely never to hear. Dominic set the key on the table between them. "Then what do I do with that?" "Make the truth yours by what you do next." He was silent for several seconds. "You do not make absolution easy. You do not need absolution from me." "No," his voice lowered, "but I find that I want your trust." The room changed. Louisa became aware of the open door, the fading light, and the distance he maintained between them. "Trust is not the same as gratitude," she said. "I know, and not the same as admiration." "I know that too." "Do you?" His eyes held hers. "I am trying to." Before she could answer, footsteps sounded in the corridor. Mr. Pell returned, carrying a folded note. "Your Grace." Dominic took it. The message was from Lady Sabina. She intended to host a county gathering in 3 days to correct what she called the destructive rumours surrounding the estate inquiry. Louisa read the note when Dominic handed it to her. "She wants witnesses. So do I. She thinks she can control the room." Dominic looked at the blank register, the quarry draft, the copied receipts, and the coded payment for the work cart. Then he looked back at Louisa. "Good." She folded the note. "Why good?" "Because she has finally chosen to gather everyone we need in one place." Lady Sabina chose the blue drawing room for the meeting, a decision so deliberate that Louisa understood the purpose before a word was spoken. 2 tall windows overlooked the east lawn. A fire burned behind a polished brass screen. The door remained open, and Mrs. Harland sat in the adjoining room with a book she had no intention of reading. Nothing about the arrangement could be called secret. Everything about it was designed to make the conversation deniable. Sabina stood beside the fireplace in pearl grey silk, composed and elegant, as though she had invited Louisa to discuss flowers. "Miss Staveley," she said, "thank you for coming. You made it sound important." "It is." Sabina gestured toward a chair. Louisa remained standing. After a moment, Sabina did the same. "You have become the subject of a great deal of talk." "I am aware, and talk has consequences. So does silence." Sabina's expression barely changed. "You are clever." That is precisely why I hoped we might speak sensibly. Louisa waited. Sabina crossed to a writing table and touched a sealed packet. You are not wealthy. No, you have no independent income, beyond a modest allowance, and what small sums you earn, assisting with parish correspondence. Louisa felt the insult hidden beneath the accuracy. That is also true. Then I hope you will not mistake practicality for cruelty. Sabina opened the packet and placed several folded papers on the table. I am prepared to arrange an annuity sufficient for your comfort. A cottage could be secured for you in another county. Hampshire, perhaps, or Kent. You would have independence, privacy, and introductions suitable to your birth. Louisa looked at the papers, but did not touch them. In exchange for what? Nothing dishonorable. Then say it plainly. Sabina's eyes cooled. You would leave Derbyshire until this unpleasant attention has passed. And Hollin End, the road can be restored quietly. Louisa's heart gave one hard beat. Quietly. Yes, and the rent reviewed. Quietly. There is no virtue in spectacle. There is no virtue in hiding theft either. Sabina's face hardened at last. Be careful. You asked for plain speech. I offered you safety. No. You offered me comfort in exchange for absence. Sabina took one step closer. Do you imagine society will reward you for this? You are 33, unmarried, without fortune, already discussed in every respectable house between here and Ashbourne. When this inquiry ends, the Duke will still be a Duke. You will still be the woman everyone watched him defend. The words landed where Sabina intended. Louisa let them. Then she answered, I will not be bought out of a road I never owned, nor out of a truth that belongs to other people. Sabina stared at her. You think this is about nobility? No, I think it is about whether 17 households can be made invisible, because the people doing it expect no one important to object. And you believe yourself important now. Louisa held her gaze. Important enough to say no. For the first time, Sabina's composure fractured, only slightly. Her hand tightened against the edge of the table. Louisa looked at the sealed papers, then back at her. Did you ever ask Mr. Arkwright where the money came from? Sabina said nothing. Louisa waited. The silence lengthened. Did you? She asked again. Sabina's chin lifted. I have no obligation to submit to an interrogation in my nephew's house. No, but you offered me an annuity to leave it. Sabina's eyes sharpened. Dominic has encouraged your insolence. He tried to silence me once, and yet you remain close enough to be useful to him. That is not an answer. Sabina turned away. It was the first defeat she had shown, and it came not from accusation, but from refusal. Louisa understood then that Sabina might not know every mechanism Quentin had used, but she had known enough to avoid asking questions whose answers might cost her comfort. That kind of ignorance was not innocence. Louisa moved toward the doorway. Sabina spoke behind her. You are more dangerous than I expected. Louisa stopped. No, Lady Sabina. I am simply not leaving. She stepped into the adjoining room. Mrs. Harland rose at once. Neither woman looked back. By the time they reached the front steps of Stonebarrow Park, a groom was galloping across the yard toward the main offices with a message. For Dominic. Something had happened. Less than an hour later, Dominic stood in his study with Mr. Pell and Mr. Quenby. Quentin Arkwright had entered the estate office through a side door, claiming he needed access to tax correspondence. A junior clerk found him removing pages from an older maintenance ledger. 2 pages had already been torn free and burned in the office grate. At nearly the same time, Eli Foster sent word that another man had visited the smithy and urged him to reconsider whether his memory of the lock order was reliable. Dominic listened without interruption. Do we have copies of the destroyed entries, of the essential figures? Yes, Your Grace, Mr. Quenby said. 2 sets. One remains with me. The other is secured separately. The villagers' receipts, still with their owners. We have witnessed copies. Ellie's Audiobook, copied 3 times. Dominic's expression went very still. Bring Mr. Arkwright here. Quentin arrived 10 minutes later. He looked tired but composed. Your Grace, I can explain. You removed pages from estate records. Pages containing errors. You burned them to prevent confusion. Dominic's eyes hardened. You have mistaken me for a fool too many times. Quentin drew himself upright. I have served this estate for 16 years. Then, you had 16 years to understand what duty meant. You are allowing one woman's accusations to destroy a career. No, you destroyed it when you tried to destroy evidence. Quentin's face changed. You cannot prove what was on those pages. I do not need to. Copies were made yesterday. Silence. It was the first time Dominic had seen genuine fear in him. You are dismissed, he said. Quentin stared. Your Grace, effective immediately. You will surrender all estate keys, seals, papers, and correspondence. You will not speak privately to any tenant, clerk, witness, or servant connected to this inquiry. Mr. Quenby will place evidence of fraud, embezzlement, record destruction, and witness pressure before the county magistrate. Quentin's composure broke. Because of her, Dominic stepped closer. Because of what you did. Quentin gave a bitter laugh. Do you really believe that is what people will say? They will say, the Duke of Ormsleigh lost judgment over a rector's daughter. The study door opened before Dominic could answer. Lady Sabina entered without waiting to be announced. Louisa was behind her with Mrs. Harland. Sabina's eyes swept from Quentin to Dominic. So it has come to this. Dominic's voice cooled. He was caught destroying records. And naturally, you interpret everything in the way Miss Staveley prefers. Louisa remained near the doorway. Sabina turned toward her. There, look at her. The entire county already knows. Dominic has suspended business, insulted neighbors, dismissed an old servant, and turned his estate upside down because he cannot separate infatuation from judgment. Dominic moved, but Louisa spoke first. No. Everyone looked at her. She crossed the room slowly. Do not defend me yet. Dominic stopped. Louisa faced Sabina. You offered me an annuity to leave Derbyshire. Quentin looked sharply towards Sabina. Dominic's expression darkened. Sabina lifted her chin. I offered compassion. You offered silence, and you refused because you enjoy your influence. Louisa ignored the insult and turned toward Dominic. This was the question that mattered, not whether he cared for her, not whether society believed he did. Will you tell them your house failed before you tell them your steward did? The room went still. Dominic looked at her, and she saw that he understood every part of the question. Would he blame Quentin alone? Would he protect Ormsleigh by pretending corruption had happened beneath him but never because of the system he had trusted? His answer came without delay. Yes. Sabina stared. Dominic did not look away from Louisa. I will tell them I trusted the records because they were mine. I will tell them I accepted a clean map before I accepted an inconvenient witness. I will tell them my house failed first. Something inside Louisa shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but trust had begun where pride ended. Quentin looked between them and seemed to understand that the inquiry had grown larger than the pages he had tried to burn. Sabina understood too. Then hurried footsteps sounded in the corridor. Mr. Pell entered carrying a dust-covered ledger wrapped in cloth. Your Grace, Dominic turned. What is it? Mr. Pell placed the book on the desk, the old parish carrier route ledger. Louisa's breath caught. Quentin went pale. Mr. Pell continued. It was found in a locked secondary cabinet in the estate office. Dominic looked at Quentin. Who controlled the key? Mr. Pell answered quietly. Mr. Arkwright. The great hall at Stonebarrow Park looked less like a room for celebration and more like a room prepared for judgment. By the following afternoon, rows of chairs faced the long panelled wall where the altered estate map had been hung beneath two high windows. Directly below it rested the older 1838 tithe map, its inked line marking Old Holland Road with quiet certainty. On a long table nearby, Mr. Pell had witnessed copies of rent receipts, Eli Foster's order entry, the quarry draft, and the records of hidden maintenance payments. The old iron key lay beneath glass, visible but untouched. The recovered carrier route ledger remained sealed in brown paper at the end of the table while Mr. Quenby completed his verification of its entries. Dominic stood beneath the altered map when Louisa entered with Mrs. Harland. He turned at once. For a moment, neither spoke. The last time Louisa had stood in a public room with him, he had removed her from the inquiry before people eager to misunderstand her. Tomorrow, she would stand in front of many of those same people and speak first. That difference mattered. Dominic crossed several yards toward her, then stopped at a respectful distance. Thank you for coming. Louisa looked toward the wall. You told me I would speak for myself. You will. Then I came to make certain you remembered. Something almost like pain moved through his expression. I remember. Mrs. Harland quietly moved toward Mr. Pell, who was checking the order of the evidence table. She remained within sight. Dominic gestured toward the map. I want to ask you something before tomorrow. Louisa looked at him. Ask. How do you want the truth presented? The question surprised her. What do you mean? Not what I want. Not what Mr. Quenby thinks is most orderly. Not what the magistrate expects. You brought the discrepancy to my attention. You carried the petition. You found the road on the ground after my map denied it. How do you want your role described? Louisa studied him. There had been a time when he would have decided first and informed her afterward. I speak first when the road is discussed. Done. I am not introduced as your charitable concern. You will not be. Not your protégé. No, not as a lady whose reputation you are trying to repair. Dominic's face tightened. Never. She looked toward the altered map again. Then introduce me as I am. Miss Louisa Staveley, the witness who brought the discrepancy to his Grace's attention. Dominic nodded once. Exactly that. And if someone interrupts me, I will stop them. Louisa held his gaze. Not by answering for me. He understood. No, I will preserve your right to answer. There is a difference. I know. You did not always. No. The silence that followed was not comfortable, but Dominic did not try to soften it. Louisa walked toward the evidence table. Will the tenants speak? Those who wish to. Mrs. Mercer? Yes. Ellie Foster? Yes. Tom Weller? Dominic's expression cooled. He has been formally requested to attend because his statement at the assembly is now relevant. Louisa glanced toward the sealed carrier ledger. And Mr. Voss, also requested. Quentin? He may attend and answer what is put to him. You are allowing that. If he stays away, he will later say judgment was made behind closed doors. She considered that. And Lady Sabina? She is coming. Of course she is. Dominic followed her gaze to the sealed ledger. Mr. Quenby has not yet told me everything in it. You have not opened it? Not since it was secured. I told him to verify the entries first. Louisa looked at him with faint surprise. You waited. I am learning. Slowly. Cruel. Accurate. For the first time that day, a brief smile touched his mouth. It vanished almost at once, but the warmth of it remained. Dominic looked toward the great hall doors. There is something else I must say before tomorrow. Louisa went still. That sounds ominous. It may be. Then be precise. He took one slow breath. What I feel for you is no longer gratitude. Her face changed slightly. Dominic. It was the first time she had used his given name without anger beneath it. He heard that. She saw him hear it. I know, he said. Do you? Enough to know I should not say this tomorrow, after the truth is made public, when you might feel watched or indebted. Louisa said nothing. He continued. I admire you. I trust your judgment. I find myself wondering what you would think of decisions before I make them. I have discovered that this is deeply inconvenient. But despite herself, Louisa nearly smiled. How tragic for you. Very, you have my sympathy. I doubt that. Wisely. The humor faded gently. Dominic did not step closer. But it is more than admiration. The hall seemed to grow quieter around them. Louisa became aware of Mrs. Harland across the room, of Mr. Pell turning pages, of the open doors and servants moving beyond them. Everything remained proper. Nothing felt distant. Why tell me now? She asked. Because tomorrow, if I speak publicly in your defense, I do not want you wondering whether I am using justice to court you. And if I expose my own house, I do not want you thinking I expect affection as payment for doing what I should have done from the beginning. Louisa held his gaze. You have thought about this carefully. Painfully. Good. He accepted the rebuke. I will not put a proposal beside a debt and ask you to tell the difference. For the first time, Louisa looked openly moved. Her fingers tightened once against the fold of her skirt. That is the first thing you have said about affection that makes me less afraid of it. Dominic did not move. Then I will say nothing more. For now. His breath changed. For now? She looked toward the evidence table. Tomorrow has enough work without your vanity, trying to interpret every word I speak. A quiet laugh escaped him. It surprised them both. Mrs. Harland glanced over, then deliberately turned back to Mr. Pell. Dominic lowered his voice. You are cruel. No, I am precise. That is worse. This time, Louisa did smile, briefly. Then the great doors opened. Mr. Quenby entered, carrying the verified carrier route ledger beneath one arm. With him came the county magistrate and 2 clergymen. Behind them followed neighbouring landowners and several representatives from nearby parishes. Soon the hall began to fill. The residents of Hollin End arrived in small groups, dressed in their best clothes and carrying the unease of people unused to being asked to speak where their landlords and social superiors could hear them. Mrs. Mercer came with her cane. Eli Foster entered without his order book because the original had already been secured. Tom Weller arrived pale and visibly uncomfortable. He stood near the back until Mr. Pell directed him to a seat reserved for witnesses. Mr. Voss came next, his expression defensive. He avoided Tom's eyes. Quentin arrived alone. The room noticed him. His clothes were immaculate. But the control that once made him seem untouchable had thinned. He looked at the altered map, then at the sealed documents, and finally at the carrier route ledger now resting beside Mr. Quenby. His face changed. Lady Sabina entered last. She wore black silk and pearls. Her posture was flawless. She greeted the magistrate as though attending a formal reception and took her place near the front without asking permission. Dominic watched her, then looked toward Louisa. Are you ready? No? He seemed surprised, she continued. But I am still going to do it." His expression softened. "That is usually what courage means. Do not become poetic now. I will resist." Mr. Pell approached. "Your Grace, everyone expected is present." Dominic nodded. The great doors began to close. Conversation faded. The altered map dominated the wall. Beneath it, the old tithe map waited. The copied receipts lay in order. The carrier route ledger sat unopened before the room. Dominic moved toward the front, then stopped. He turned to Louisa. Every eye followed him. His voice carried clearly. "Miss Louisa Staveley, the witness who brought the discrepancy to my attention." He stepped aside. "You first." Louisa drew one slow breath and walked toward the map. Louisa stood before the altered map and let the silence settle. Every face in the great hall had turned toward her. Tenants from Hollin End sat beside clergy, neighbouring landowners, estate officers, the magistrate, Quentin Arkwright, Mr. Voss, Tom Weller, and Lady Sabina Dunstan. Dominic stood several feet behind her. He had promised not to speak for her. Now she trusted him enough to test that promise. Louisa looked first at the blank space where Hollin End should have been. Then she turned toward the room. If Hollin End did not exist, who took its rent? No one moved. The question was simple. That made it harder to escape. Mrs. Mercer lowered her head. Eli Foster folded his arms. Quentin remained pale but composed. Louisa continued. 17 cottages stand beyond the western pasture. They are occupied. They have been occupied for years. The people who live there paid money to this estate. Yet on this map, their road is gone. In the rent register, their place is empty. In the proposed quarry agreement, the land is described as unoccupied. She stepped aside. "Those are not opinions, Mr." Pell brought forward the 1838 tithe map and placed it beneath the altered estate map. Old Hollin Road was clearly marked, so was the settlement. The magistrate leaned closer. Louisa said, "The parish copy dates from 1838. The road appears there, so does the village." Quentin spoke at last. "Roads become disused. Settlements decline. Maps are revised." Louisa looked at him. "Then why are 17 cottages still occupied?" "Informal occupants do not create formal tenancies by mere presence." Mrs. Mercer rose. "I paid rent 2 weeks before the Duke came." Quentin turned toward her. "You paid a contribution for continued occupancy." Mrs. Mercer held up her receipt. "The man who took it said I would lose my cottage if I didn't pay." A murmur moved through the hall. Mr. Pell laid out the witnessed copies of 16 rent receipts. Different dates, different amounts, the same estate collectors, the same clerk's signature on several. Quentin's mouth tightened. "Administrative confusion," he said. "Nothing more." Louisa looked toward Eli. "Mr. Foster." The blacksmith stepped forward. "You were asked about the replacement lock." "Yes. What do you remember?" "A clerk from Mr. Arkwright's office came 3 years ago and asked whether I had a lock strong enough to stop carts from using the western road." Quentin interrupted. "You said yourself that you did not fit it." Eli looked at him. "I didn't. I wrote the request down because it was strange." Mr. Pell presented the copy. "The original remains secured with Mr. Foster." Louisa turned toward the old iron key beneath glass. The key once opened the gate. After the lock changed, it no longer fit. Quentin gave a short laugh. "A key proves very little. A loan, perhaps." Louisa looked back at the map. A changed lock, a missing road, rent collected from people declared non-existent, a quarry draft describing their homes as unoccupied, missing petitions, a removed road marker, a partly burned gate. Each fact can be called small. Together, they become a pattern. The magistrate nodded once. Quentin saw it. Dominic said nothing. Louisa turned to Mr. Quenby. The solicitor opened the recovered carrier route ledger. This book was found in a locked secondary cabinet formerly controlled by Mr. Arkwright's office. Quentin's face changed. Mr. Quenby turned several pages. The first petition from Hollin End was delivered to Stonebarrow Park on June 14th. It was signed for by a clerk under Mr. Arkwright. Louisa heard Mrs. Mercer draw breath. Mr. Quenby continued. The second was delivered 3 weeks later. It, too, was signed for. Dominic's gaze fixed on Quentin. Where were they sent? Mr. Quenby looked down, not to his Grace's London correspondence bundle. Both were redirected to Mr. Arkwright's private cabinet. Silence fell hard. Louisa looked at Quentin. So the petitions did not vanish, he answered quickly. Office routing is not proof that I read them. Mr. Quenby raised another paper. No, but the notation beside the second delivery bears your own initials. Quentin went white. The hall stirred. Dominic's voice remained quiet. You received them? Quentin looked at him. I received hundreds of documents. Did you read these? I do not remember. You remembered enough to erase the road. Quentin's control cracked. The map correction came from survey advice. The cartographer says the instruction came through your office. Then a clerk acted. Louisa looked toward Mr. Voss. Perhaps this clerk? Every eye turned. Mr. Voss stiffened. Mr. Pell produced another record. The night the old road marker disappeared, an estate work cart was hired after dark. Payment came from a discretionary maintenance account controlled by Mr. Arkwright's office. Quentin said, That proves nothing. Not by itself, Mr. Pell answered. He unfolded a signed statement. The labourer who accepted the payment has now been identified. Mr. Voss's face lost colour. Mr. Pell continued. He states that Mr. Voss hired him to remove the old road marker and damage the gate sufficiently to destroy its identifying ironwork. Rain prevented the fire from spreading. A murmur broke through the hall. Mr. Voss stepped forward. That man is lying. He also described the rope used to drag the marker, Mr. Pell said. The same kind issued with estate work carts. A frayed section was found at the stone base. Mr. Voss turned toward Quentin. Quentin did not look at him. Louisa watched the abandonment happen. You told me it was necessary, Voss said. Quentin's head snapped toward him. Be quiet. The command came too late. The room had heard. Dominic's face hardened. Mr. Quenby looked toward Tom Weller. Mr. Weller, you made a statement at the county assembly regarding Miss Staveley and his Grace. Tom stood slowly. His face was grey. Yes. Was your account complete? Tom looked toward Mr. Voss. Voss looked away. No, Louisa remained still. Mr. Quenby asked, Were you approached before the assembly? Yes. By whom? Tom swallowed. Mr. Voss. The room seemed to contract. What did he ask you to do? He said. The estate office needed a respectable recollection, said I. Only had to describe what I saw in a way that made it sound like Miss Staveley and his Grace had been alone longer than they were. Mrs. Harland closed her eyes. Louisa did not. Were you offered payment? Mr. Quenby asked. Tom's voice dropped. Yes, for a debt. Yes. Mr. Pell placed another copied account entry on the table. The payment had come from the same discretionary maintenance account used for the work cart. Quentin spoke sharply. Voss acted without my knowledge. Mr. Voss stared at him. You told me to stop her before she reached the books. Quentin turned on him. You fool. The words were quiet. They were also fatal. No one in the hall moved. Louisa looked at Dominic. His expression was unreadable, but she saw the truth in his eyes. The same office had intercepted petitions, changed access, manipulated records, hired men to remove physical evidence, and shaped gossip to destroy the woman who had exposed it. Administrative erasure had become social erasure because the first kind had failed. Lady Sabina rose. "This has gone far enough." Her voice was controlled, but not effortless. "Mr. Arkwright committed grave errors. Mr. Voss clearly acted recklessly. But there is no justification for pretending the entire house of Ormsleigh conspired against a village." Louisa turned to her. "No one said the entire house did." Sabina's eyes narrowed. Mr. Quenby opened the smaller ledger. "There are also payments, my lady." "What payments?" "Funds moved through accounts controlled by Mr. Arkwright. Several reduced obligations connected to your household and private debts." Sabina went pale. That proves benefit, not knowledge. Louisa reached into her reticule and removed Sabina's letter. "Then perhaps this helps." Sabina stared at the paper. Louisa unfolded it. "Lady Sabina offered me an annuity, a cottage in another county, and suitable introductions if I left Derbyshire quietly." A murmur passed across the hall. Sabina lifted her chin. "I offered compassion." Louisa read the final line aloud. "There are truths which cost more to reveal than to bury." Sabina said nothing. Dominic looked at his aunt. "Did you know Hollin End was occupied?" A long pause. "I knew people remained there." "Did you know money was being collected?" "I knew money came from the western ground." "Did you know the quarry draft called the land unoccupied?" Her composure finally fractured. "I knew exposure would cause scandal. I knew the estate had financial pressures. Quentin said the matter was being handled." Dominic's face hardened. "And you chose not to ask how?" Sabina looked at him with sudden anger. "I protected this house." Dominic's voice dropped. "You did not protect this house from disgrace. You asked other people to carry it where we could not see." Sabina sat down slowly. Dominic turned to the room. "Mr. Arkwright is permanently dismissed from all estate service. Mr. Voss is dismissed as well. Evidence of fraud, embezzlement, record destruction, suppression of correspondence, witness pressure, and destruction of physical evidence will be placed before my solicitor and the county magistrate." Quentin opened his mouth. Dominic continued. "The quarry agreement is cancelled. Hollin End will be restored to every estate record. The road will be reopened. Rent discrepancies will be corrected. No resident will be penalized for speaking here." He looked toward Tom. "Your statement at the assembly is formally withdrawn and recorded as influenced by payment." Tom lowered his head. Dominic then faced Lady Sabina. "Your access to estate funds ends today. You will withdraw from all estate affairs and leave Stonebarrow Park." Sabina closed her eyes. Dominic turned toward Louisa, then toward the tenants. "Miss Staveley was dismissed because she lacked rank. I was believed because I had too much of it. I accepted a clean map before I accepted an inconvenient witness. That failure is mine." The hall remained silent. "I trusted records because they belonged to my house. I trusted authority because it served under my name. I did not ask soon enough who paid for that trust. Hollin End did." Louisa felt something inside her release. Not triumph. Something deeper. He had done what he promised. He had named his own failure before the villain's guilt could hide it. Mrs. Mercer rose with effort and walked toward the map. In her hand was the receipt she had carried since the first hearing. She placed it over the blank space where Hollin End should have been. Her fingers trembled. "Then we are visible again." No one applauded. The silence was stronger than applause. Later, after the hall had emptied and evening light stretched across the floor, Louisa remained near the old iron key. Dominic approached but stopped several feet away. "I love you," he said. The words were quiet. Louisa looked at him. I know he drew breath. but she lifted one hand. Not today. His expression did not fall. He understood. Louisa looked toward the key, then toward the blank map now covered by Mrs. Mercer's receipt. Ask me when the road is open. Dominic's eyes held hers. I will. Several weeks later, the restored gate stood waiting beneath a pale autumn sky. And Dominic was already there. The road had not been remade into something ornamental for the benefit of visiting gentry. No marble marker praised ducal generosity. No new arch announced a charitable act. The worst ruts had been levelled, the drainage cleared, and the damaged gate repaired so carts could pass again. That was all Hollin End had needed. A usable road, an honest record, the right to exist without first becoming a spectacle. Louisa approached with Mrs. Harland several yards behind her, near enough for propriety and far enough to offer privacy. Dominic wore a dark coat against the cold. He did not come forward to meet her. He waited beside the gate, exactly as though he understood that the final steps were hers to take. The old iron key rested in her palm. For weeks, it had been held as evidence, measured, copied into records, described by clerks, and examined by men who had once believed a map more readily than a woman. Now it had been returned to Hollin End. Mrs. Mercer had insisted that Louisa be the first to use it. Eli Foster had repaired the original locking mechanism rather than replacing it again. Louisa stopped before the gate. Dominic looked at the key, then at her. Does it fit? There is one way to find out. She inserted it into the lock. For one breathless moment, nothing happened. Then the iron turned. The click was small. Louisa felt it in her chest. She lifted the latch and pushed. The gate opened. Dominic smiled. It was not the restrained change of expression she had learned to notice in the map room. It was open, warm, and almost disarming. You told me to ask when the road was open. Louisa kept one hand on the gate. I remember. He glanced once toward Mrs. Harland, who had suddenly found the hedgerow deeply interesting. Then he looked back at Louisa. I considered several speeches. That sounds dangerous. It was exhausting. For you or the speeches? Both. She almost laughed. He stepped closer, but not too close. That too had become part of the man he was learning to be. I do not want you because you exposed Quentin. Louisa's expression softened. Dominic continued. I do not want you because you saved my estate from disgrace. Though you did. I do not want you because I owe you something. You do owe me an apology for the assembly. I gave one. It was acceptable. Your generosity overwhelms me. This time she did laugh, quietly. Dominic's eyes warmed. Then seriousness returned. I want you because you are the first person who made me understand that listening is not surrender. You are the first woman beside whom I have never wished to stand taller than I am. Louisa's hand tightened around the key. Dominic did not kneel. He did not produce a ring before she had answered. He simply stood before her as a man who had once believed power meant possessing the clearest view, and who had learned instead that power could blind as easily as it revealed. I love you, he said. I loved you before I understood what to call it. I think perhaps I began when you placed that key on my map and refused to be embarrassed by the truth. Louisa looked at the open gate. I was embarrassed. You hid it well. That is not the same as not feeling it. No. His voice gentled. I know that now. She looked back at him. And what happens when I disagree with you after we are married? His breath caught at the words, after we are married. He controlled the reaction with visible effort. I imagine it will happen before breakfast, frequently. Then I will try to survive. And if I tell you that your records are wrong, I will ask what evidence you have. Improvement. I am trying. Louisa studied him for another moment. She thought of the first map room, the funeral procession crossing wet pasture, the chapel at Hollin End, the assembly where he had failed her, the smithy where he had apologized without defending himself, the great hall where he had named his own failure before witnesses. Love had not arrived as rescue. It had arrived as correction, restraint, attention, and the courage to change after being wrong. "Then ask me properly," she said. Dominic drew one slow breath. "Louisa Staveley, will you marry me?" Yes. The word was simple. It needed thinning more. For a moment, neither moved. Then Dominic held out his hand, not claiming, only offering. Louisa looked at it and placed her own in his. His fingers closed around hers carefully. Mrs. Harland made a suspicious sound behind them that might have been a cough. Louisa glanced back. "You may stop pretending not to listen." "I heard nothing," Mrs. Harland said. "Naturally." Dominic looked toward the road beyond the gate. "Shall we?" Louisa released his hand long enough to open the gate wider. "I go first. I expected nothing else." She stepped through. Dominic followed beside her. Their courtship after that day was proper, visible, and entirely unlike the whispers that had once surrounded them. He visited with Mrs. Harland present. Louisa dined at Stonebarrow Park under respectable conditions. They argued about roads, tenant petitions, maps, and whether Dominic had an unreasonable affection for excessively detailed memoranda. He did. He defended them badly. They married quietly the following spring in the parish church. Mrs. Harland stood beside Louisa as the nearest thing to family she had chosen for herself. The people of Hollin End attended among the witnesses. Mrs. Mercer cried without apology. Eli Foster claimed he had dust in his eye. No one spoke of rescue. No one needed to. By then, the changes at Stonebarrow Park had become permanent. Once every quarter, tenants could present petitions directly without passing through a single controlling office. No one officer held sole authority over maps, rents, access complaints, and incoming correspondence. Rent receipts were reviewed independently. Hollin End remained represented by its own residents, and Old Hollin Road appeared clearly on every new estate map. Quentin Arkwright never returned to estate service. The evidence against him proceeded through the solicitor and county magistrate, and his career did not survive the exposure of fraud, concealed rents, destroyed records, suppressed petitions, and pressure placed upon witnesses. Mr. Voss was dismissed and publicly discredited after his part in the false testimony, and destruction of evidence was established. Tom Weller withdrew his assembly statement and carried the shame of having sold the truth cheaply. Lady Sabina left Stonebarrow Park and lost all influence over estate funds. Her standing never fully recovered, because the knowledge she had tried to keep respectable had become public. Louisa did not celebrate any of their falls. Justice was enough. 1 year after the gate reopened, she and Dominic returned to Old Hollin Road on an autumn morning, much like the one on which she had first challenged his certainty. The hedges had grown thicker. Wagon wheels had pressed fresh lines into the earth. Smoke rose from the cottages ahead. The road no longer looked abandoned because people were using it. Louisa still carried the old iron key. She kept it not as a relic of suffering, but because Mrs. Mercer had declared that anyone foolish enough to lose it twice deserved the inconvenience. At the gate, Dominic stopped. Louisa glanced at him. "Well, I am waiting. For what? For you to open it?" She smiled. "You have a key now." "I know. And yet you are waiting. I have learned patience." "That is debatable." He looked offended. "Cruel. Precise." The old exchange returned between them. Softened by time, Louisa placed the key in the lock and turned it. The gate opened easily. Dominic did not step ahead. He waited. Louisa crossed the threshold first. Then he joined her. They walked side by side down the road that had once vanished from his map, past fields that no longer hid the people beyond them, toward a village that no longer needed to prove it existed. The key rested warm in Louisa's hand. Dominic's shoulder moved beside hers. Ahead, the road remained open.